Not my normal thing, but I don't think they turned out too bad. Let me show you how I did it. Hello. A few weeks ago, Chad Tompkins from the Tabletop Terrain Guild did a great low-profile pond. He called them swamp tiles that he could just pick up and drop on his game table. One of the great features of his ponds was that there was no rise on the banks and they fit seamlessly with his terrain. After chatting with him for a bit, he challenged me to make my own version. So here we are. After making one, just to make sure my ideas would work right and play well, I brought it out, showed my players. They loved it, and so yeah, it's time to move on to the second part. Make a pond. Anyway, here we go. I cut that board from 3mm MDF, sanded the edges and beveled the inside of the pond, spray painted it with some brown Krylon, brought it back in and did some airbrushing on it. Starting from the light, going to the dark that you can see in the middle. It's just shades of brown going from a light tan to a dark chocolate bar color brown. While the paint was drying, I moved on to make the growing stuff that I would use to decorate the banks. I started with some Harvest Gold field grass, link in the description below. It was too long for this build and would overwhelm the cattails that I had on hand, so I put a tight twist into some small bundles, dabbed on some PVA, and reversed the twist. This pulled the glue into the threads. Later I cut each bundle in the middle of the glued area to make little stands of grass. While the glue dried, I moved on to the rest of the greenery. These cattails are pretty nice, but the bases are cut at an angle. This makes them easy to press into foam, but not so great to place on a flat surface like this pond. I used a sharp X-Acto and cut each base square, setting them aside while I continued on trimming some lichen and clump foliage before concentrating on building some shrubberies. For the shrubberies, I used some wire branches with dead leaves on them. I bent the branches into interesting angles and used some hot glue to stick a few together. Once done, I used PVA to attach clump foliage and let them dry. The clump foliage I have really isn't the best for this, it's just what I had on hand. Sometimes it's really worthwhile just to put in an extra order and wait for Amazon to deliver, because I really don't like the clump foliage or how it turned out in this build. I mean, it's playable. The players don't seem to notice it, but every time I look at the piece, all I see is those little tiny nylon threads holding the whole thing together. Now is when the pond really started to come together. Using hot glue and tweezers, I placed cattails and the reeds that I had made earlier, just sticking them wherever I thought happy little plants would live, all the while chasing those annoying glue threads. An easy way to prevent threads from forming is to circle the hot glue with the gun. This will get most of the threads to break. Of course, I need to take my own advice from time to time. As I worked around the pond, I also placed some lichen in the shallows and some of that clump foliage. I knew the clump foliage would soak up resin, and from my earlier build, I liked how that looked for underwater plants. I wasn't too concerned about the balls of hot glue at the base of the plants. There really wasn't that much, and resin would also work to secure them to the base. About halfway through, I decided that the large flat banks were kind of boring. So I pulled out some white pumice stones and hot glued them into a few places, making what I thought looked like interesting piles. I even did a stacked stone arch. I normally don't like things like this, especially when I find them while camping or trail walking. I get having fun and enjoying nature, but please, if you do this, knock your creations down. Leave nature as you found it so others can enjoy. Having a man-made thing unnecessarily disrupt a natural experience isn't cool. Well, after getting the stones placed, I spread some PVA and applied some static grass. This is where I diverted from my plan. I was going to use PVA and some regular grass flocking. I should have done that first. The static grass applied well, and I couldn't complain about that, but when the glue dried, I could see the color of the primer through the transparent PVA. It made the whole thing a bit more dull than I wanted, kind of late summer rather than early or midsummer. Anyway, when applying a static grass, hold the wire close to the surface you're shaking the grass onto. This will cause the grass to land in the glue kind of standing up. It looks great when everything goes right and the finish is awesome. It gives a much more realistic look to any piece that you're working with. It is messy though. I should have put some construction paper down so I could easily pour the grass back into the shaker. Wash, rinse, and repeat. And take my own advice. Again, the downside to using static grass is just how messy it can be. As you can see, I got it all over the place. It's just a mess. It's easily fixed. Let me knock some of this excess off here. Wouldn't want to have to clean the mess twice. And grab my trusty poofy makeup brush, sweep all this stuff up, and try not to make that mistake again. It's now time to paint those stark white stones. An important note about working with pumice, whether it's black pumice or white pumice like what I'm using here, it's got a great texture and it's a good material to work with, but it's also very thirsty. Make sure you seal these with some Mod Podge and paint before painting it the color set you want. Otherwise the stone kind of drinks the paint and you end up using more than you really wanted to. Just as with regular stone walls, like on buildings or ruins, I painted these with a variety of colors. Nature isn't monochrome and our stonework shouldn't be either. After painting the stones, I went ahead and spread some PVA all over the board and applied some more static grass. I even applied some static grass tufts that I'd made earlier. Those are the brighter spots that you can see. Then grabbed a pin vise, drilled little tiny holes into the MDF, not going all the way through. This would give me an anchor point for the stems of the shrubberies that I was putting in. Put a lot of hot glue on the ends of each of the shrubs and based them into their holes, and ended up going back still and putting some more glue around the places where they joined the ground. Covered that up with some more clump foliage, and in that use the clump foliage isn't too bad. Made sure that everything was looking good, one last brush over and touch up, and this project was done. Low profile pond. I mixed up a brown resin mix using 2-part Envirotex resin that you can get from all sorts of places. Again, the link is below. But there it is, another pond. Had a lot of fun with this build. Start to finish, it took about 10 hours to complete. This is something you can easily do on a weekend, and it will look great on your table and your players will love it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. I create new videos regularly. Please use the Amazon affiliate links in the description below or become a patron. The support you give helps fund this channel. Thanks for watching.